Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. We are tackling Jordan Peterson's Beyond Order today. And we're not just skimming the surface, we're going deep to pull out the real gems Peterson's packing in this one.
Absolutely. We're talking about the actionable stuff, the stuff you can actually use to navigate life's chaos and come out ahead.
And speaking of chaos, Peterson gets really real in this book about the chaos he was facing while writing it.
Yeah, he was going through some intense personal stuff. It's almost hard to believe everything that was happening in his life at that time.
Right. I mean, anxiety, bad reactions to medication, his wife battling a serious illness. It really makes you realize that even brilliant minds like Peterson's face very human struggles.
And that's what makes it so relatable. He's right there in the trenches with us. And the crazy part is that he uses these experiences, these trials by fire, to introduce one of his central ideas in Beyond Order.
Which is?
That every rule was once a creative act. Basically, he's saying that the rules we live by, the principles we hold dear, often come from chaos, from those moments when we're forced to adapt and grow.
So it's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. We discover our strengths when we have to confront our limitations, when we're backed into a corner and have to come up with something new. And Peterson doesn't just talk about this in a theoretical sense either. He brings it to life with stories from his own life and from his work with clients.
Like that story about the client who was terrified of public speaking.
Oh yeah, that one's a classic.
So how did Peterson handle that? It's not like he could just magically erase the guy's fear.
He could, however, help him understand that fear and give him tools to overcome it. He used that story from the Bible, the Exodus. It's all about chaos and transformation, right? And I think that's what Peterson was getting at. Even in the middle of what feels like an impossible situation, there's always a way forward. He encouraged his client to face his fear gradually, take small steps, expose himself to public speaking a little at a time.
And that idea of taking those small steps, facing our fears head on, it's like a perfect segue into another rule that really grabbed my attention. Rule 6, abandon ideology. It's like Peterson's throwing down a gauntlet, challenging us to break free from those rigid belief systems. Those prepackaged narratives that we sometimes cling to?
It's about recognizing that the world is way more complex than any one ideology can account for. Peterson's warning us against dogma, against blindly following a set of beliefs just because they're comfortable or familiar.
He even calls ideology a cheap substitute for genuine thought. Ouch. But I get his point. It's tempting to latch on to those easy answers to see the world in black and white.
Right. It simplifies things, makes us feel like we have it all figured out. But Peterson wants us to resist that temptation. He's pushing us to embrace the unknown, to get comfortable with uncertainty and actually do the hard work of thinking for ourselves.
Which is not always easy.
Definitely not. But it's where the real growth happens. And he doesn't just leave us hanging out there with all this newfound freedom and nowhere to put it. He gives us a pretty solid game plan in Rule 7. Work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens.
I love that. It's a challenge and an invitation all rolled into one.
It is. He's basically saying find something meaningful, something you truly connect with, and give it everything you've got. He uses this really cool analogy to illustrate it, the diamond analogy. He says, like a diamond which can be produced from coal only under conditions of tremendous heat and pressure.
So we're talking about real transformation here.
Absolutely. Pressure and heat, creating something valuable, something beautiful. It's about finding our purpose, honing our craft, pushing ourselves to become the best version of ourselves. And it's not just some abstract concept. He tells this great story about a waiter who decided to make his job his one thing. This guy was feeling totally stuck in a rut, just going through the motions at work. But then he heard Peterson speak, and everything changed.
What did he do?
He started paying attention to every detail. Like really focusing on doing his job as well as he possibly could, going above and beyond for customers. And you know what? It totally paid off.
No way. What happened?
He was promoted 3 times in 6 months. Like, talk about a glow up.
Wow, that's incredible. So it really is about focusing our energy on something that matters, pushing ourselves to be better, even in those everyday moments.
Exactly. It's like that saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. But here's the thing. While Peterson's all about standing out, about excelling, he also warns against standing out for the wrong reasons. He has this really thought-provoking anecdote about a wild beast.
A wild beast. Okay, this I got to hear.
So these researchers, they were studying animal behavior, and they marked this wild beast with red paint.
Red paint. Wow. Seems kind of random.
Right. And it seemed harmless enough at the time, but it had some seriously bad consequences for the wild beast.
Oh, no. What happened?
The red paint made it stand out from the herd, like a beacon. And well, you can guess what happened next. It didn't end well for the wildebeest.
That's awful. But I see what you mean. It's like a cautionary tale.
Exactly. It reminds us that standing out, while important, also has its risks. We have to be strategic about it. Find that sweet spot between fitting in and standing out from the crowd.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
For sure. And it's something we all struggle with at some point or another. But Peterson doesn't just leave it at that. He takes it a step further and connects this idea of the marked wildebeest to our own experiences of pain and vulnerability.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
He's saying that when we're hurting, when we're carrying around these unseen wounds, we can feel as exposed as that wildebeest with the red paint. Like everyone's looking at us like we're a target.
I've totally felt that way before. It's
Wow.
like you're walking around with a giant neon sign above your head that says, fragile, handle with care.
Exactly. And that's where he brings in the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we try to hide from the world and even from ourselves, our fears, our anger, our shame, all those experiences that have left us feeling raw and exposed. And Peterson's argument is that we can't just ignore these shadow elements.
Yeah, it's like you can't just pretend those parts of yourself don't exist. They'll always find a way to rear their ugly heads eventually.
Exactly. And when they do, it's usually not pretty. Peterson would say we have to confront them head on, integrate them into our understanding of ourselves, even if it's painful. Actually, especially if it's painful.
It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It's going to hurt, but it's the only way to really heal.
And he illustrates this with another one of his client stories. This one's about a guy who was bullied relentlessly as a kid.
Oh, man. That brings back memories.
Right. And this client, he spent years trying to bury those memories, pretend they never happened. But of course, that never really works, does it?
Nope. Those things have a way of catching up with you.
Exactly. And they were manifesting in his life in all these unhealthy ways. So Peterson helped him revisit those painful memories, not to dwell on them or anything, but to see them through a different lens, a lens of understanding and compassion.
So it's not about wallowing in the past. It's about learning from it, extracting the wisdom from those experiences.
Exactly. And ultimately about finding a path towards healing and wholeness.
It's like taking all those shattered pieces and putting them back together in a way that makes you stronger, more resilient.
Exactly. And that brings us to a rule that seems a little out of left field at first, but actually ties into this whole idea of healing and wholeness in a really interesting way.
Which is?
Rule 8, try to make one room in your house as beautiful as possible.
Wait, really? I gotta admit, when I first read that one, I was like, did I accidentally pick up a home decor magazine?
Right. It seems a little random, but then when you think about it in the context of everything else Peterson's talking about, it starts to make a lot of sense.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about it. It's not really about interior design. It's about recognizing the importance of beauty in our lives. Peterson argues that beauty, it nourishes us, inspires us, connects us to something larger than ourselves.
I can get behind that. There's definitely something about a beautiful space that just makes you feel more at peace.
Right. And Peterson actually goes so far as to say that we live by beauty. We live by literature. We live by art. We cannot live without some connection to the divine, and beauty is divine, because in its absence, life is too short, too dismal, and too tragic.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. He's really driving home the point that beauty is essential.
It really is. It's not a luxury. It's fundamental to the human experience. And he gives some interesting personal examples to back this up. Did you know he's really into Soviet realism art? Like he actually filled his home with these paintings?
Get out. Soviet realism. Seriously. That's not exactly what I pictured his house looking like.
I know, right? It's kind of surprising. But that's what's so cool about it. It shows that beauty can be found in unexpected places, even in a genre of art that's often associated with, propaganda and ideology.
So it's like he's challenging us to be open to beauty wherever we find it, to not let our preconceived notions limit our experience.
Exactly. And he connects this back to the importance of creating beauty in our own lives. And I don't think he's just talking about art here. It's about those little things that elevate our everyday experience.
Like making your home a sanctuary, a place where you can unwind and recharge, or taking the time to appreciate a beautiful sunset.
Exactly. It's about being present, being mindful, and appreciating the beauty that's all around us, even in the midst of chaos.
So how does this tie into relationships? Because we're moving into some pretty deep territory here with rule line. Do not allow yourself to become resentful, deceitful, or arrogant.
Because it's all connected. Honesty, beauty, relationships. These are all threads in the tapestry of a meaningful life.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does Peterson connect those dots? Especially with that story about his father-in-law and the lunch plates, you know the one I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic Peterson story. Hilarious, but also really insightful.
So, for those who haven't heard it, Peterson's father-in-law apparently complained about the size of his lunch plates after, like, 20 years of marriage.
Can you imagine holding on to that for 2 decades?
It's hilarious. But it also makes you think, right? Like, what are we all holding on to that we need to let go of?
Exactly, and that's Peterson's point. He's saying that resentment, deceit, arrogance, these are all forms of dishonesty, and they eat away at us and our relationships, like a cancer.
So he's advocating for radical honesty, even about the small stuff.
Exactly, because those small things can turn into big things if you let them fester. And this all circles back to that idea of truth being a guiding principle in our lives, being truthful with ourselves and with others. And that leads us beautifully to the final rule, Rule 12. Be grateful in spite of your suffering.
Man, this one really hits home, especially considering what Peterson was going through when he wrote this book.
I know, right? He's literally going through hell and back, and he's telling us to be grateful. It seems almost impossible.
But isn't that the point? That even in the darkest of times, there's still light to be found.
Absolutely. He's not saying, just slap a smile on and pretend everything's okay. He's acknowledging the reality of suffering. But he's also saying that even in those moments of pain and despair, there are still things to be grateful for.
It reminds me of that Viktor Frankl quote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way."
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even when we feel like we've lost everything, we still have the power of choice. We can choose bitterness and resentment, or we can choose gratitude and hope.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Beyond Order, I think the question for all of us is, what will you choose? How will you face the inevitable chaos of life with courage, with authenticity, and with an open heart? What small act of courage or kindness can you take today? Food for thought. And if you want more, and trust me, there's always more, go check out Beyond Order for yourself. Until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.